Why was this the perfect crime? Until it wasn't. Mary Lynn Breeden thought Christian Cruz was her friend. She never imagined he would be the one to end her life. Presumably after they argued, he dragged her out of the car and he beat her with a tire iron. He dragged her body into a dumpster, poured 5 gallons of gas in there with her, and lit the match. Sure, the flames would erase her from existence. Her hair was fried, her skin had turned to ash. About every single piece of DNA had been destroyed. With no identity, the investigators had no leads, no security cam footage, and no path to justice. To the investigators, this case was the worst kind of nightmare, a John Doe, and the killer was a ghost. But Cruz made one tiny, microscopic mistake. Although almost everything burned in the fire, there was one tiny piece of evidence that survived, that would bring his entire world crashing down. Hiding in plain sight, Cruz sat back proud of himself and satisfied that he had pulled off the perfect crime, until it started with a call. Shortly after daybreak in Vancouver, British Columbia, July 6, 1991, firefighters were sent to a routine garbage dumpster fire. Just another Tuesday. Or was it? They put out the flames, and among the soggy, blackened trash, they found what was left of a human body. Homicide detectives were called to the scene, and the problem they were facing was huge. The body was burned so badly it couldn't be recognized. The killer had used gasoline to make the fire hotter, turning the metal dumpster into a simple furnace. Temperatures inside likely went over 500 degrees Celsius. At that heat, bone turns chalk white, shrinks, and becomes very easy to break. The victim's face was gone. Their fingerprints had disappeared in the smoke. X-rays of the victim's skull revealed several pieces of metal and a fractured skull, evidence of gunshot wounds. The fragments were so badly damaged they could not be used for ballistic identification. Bullet fragments recovered from the brain came from a .22 caliber weapon. There was no clothing, no wallet, no purse, nothing. It was, for all purposes, a ghost. A body was brought to the morgue with no name, no age, and no features to identify it. This was the killer's best trick. If you can't identify the victim, the investigation has nowhere to go. There's no family to interview, no friends to question, no last known steps to trace. The case file starts and ends with one single awful fact: John Doe, homicide. The investigators had a body, but they didn't have a person. And without a person, how could they ever hope to find the monster who did this? While one team of detectives stared at a dead end, another department got a missing persons report. A 29-year-old woman named Mary Lynn Breeden, known as Lynn to her friends, had vanished. But in a city of thousands, there was no reason to link this everyday report with the body from the dumpster. The two case files sat in different offices, completely separate. The investigation into the John Doe case stopped almost right away. There was simply no physical evidence to look at. But then, the killer made a second mistake. He got greedy. A woman was caught on bank security cameras trying to take money from Lynn Breeden's account. Not the smartest move. When police brought her in, she quickly told them about her partner, a male stripper with a violent past named Christian Albert Cruz. Suddenly, the missing persons case had a main suspect. The police had a strong feeling that Cruz was involved in Lynn's disappearance, but a feeling isn't evidence. They still had no body. They couldn't prove Lynn Breeden was even dead. The case against Cruz was weak at best, and the two investigations, the missing person and the burned body, remained parallel lines that wouldn't cross. They were so close to the truth, but they were missing the one piece that could connect it all. They needed to give the mystery person a name. This is where the case turns from a normal police story to a brilliant example of forensic work. The problem was simple. How do you get a positive ID from a pile of ash and bone? The answer was hiding in the victim's jaw. A forensic dentist, Dr. Anthony Montuoro, was brought in to look at the remains. He knew that teeth are the strongest parts of the human body. Think of a tooth like a tiny biological safe. The hard outer layers act as a natural fireproof wall. While the rest of the body falls apart, this wall can protect the soft tissue deep inside. And that tissue has a goldmine of DNA. While DNA starts to break down around 300 degrees Celsius, the tooth's protection can keep the inside just cool enough for long enough. The process itself took great care. The single tooth that survived was cleaned, then crushed into a powder. Using special chemicals, scientists broke open the cells to release any genetic material that might have survived the fire. It was a long shot, a last-ditch effort on a microscopic level. But will it work? It was the key breakthrough that blew the case wide open. Scientists compared the DNA from the tooth to samples given by Lynn Braden's family. They waited for the results to come back. The ghost in the ashes may finally have a name. But in the meantime, they focused on Cruz. Christian Cruz went from a person of interest in a disappearance to the main suspect in a brutal murder. He was asked to search his car. He lied and said it was parked cities over at his grandma's house. Investigators wondered why he was lying and knew the car must have played some part in Lynn's disappearance. Now, detectives could get a warrant to search his property. Detectives had been trailing him and knew it was just up the street. So they locked the car up and secured it overnight. And in his 1980 Oldsmobile Omega, they found it. When investigators inspected Cruz's car, they found blood spatter on the outside of the car and even more on the inside. Cruz was living out of his car. It was very messy and strewn about, but it couldn't cover up that there was more evidence that any detective could hope for to help solve Lynn's murder. Investigators also found a .22 caliber rifle, a 5-gallon gasoline container in the trunk, and a suit jacket Cruz was seen wearing at the after-hours club with Lynn. Inside the pocket, police found a Playboy bunny pendant stained with blood. It was similar to the one Lynn wore in pictures. Many items were covered in blood: clothes, a photo album, a spare tire, and a tire iron found in the back seat. Even with the large amount of evidence in the old car, there was no way to know to whom the blood belonged because there were no fingerprints, no blood or skin cells to run it against for comparison because the body was so badly damaged and burned. The samples were rushed to the lab. Forensic scientists went to work, comparing the blood from the items to the DNA profile they had carefully pulled from the tooth. Another perfect match. The two parallel lines of the investigation had just slammed into each other. The science could not be argued with. The victim's DNA, saved by a tooth that survived a fire, was now found in the suspect's car. It was the solid link, the golden thread that tied the killer to his victim. The story was now sadly clear. Cruz, wanting money, had murdered his acquaintance, Lynn. Knowing that the body was his biggest problem, he tried to completely destroy it with fire. He was counting on the fact that no one could connect a pile of anonymous ashes to him. What he didn't count on was the toughness of a single tooth and the skill of the scientists who knew how to make it talk. Now they just had to prove the case in court. With the science locked in, the case against Christian Cruz moved to the courtroom. The prosecution built its argument piece by piece. First, the bank video showed a motive and linked Cruz to the victim's final days. Then, it was retold in court the events that likely led up to Lynn's murder. At the after-hours nightclub, Lynn and her boyfriend, Chris Paycook, got into an argument when she flirted with some other men that she had met there. Paycook left the club alone. Witnesses said Lynn was looking for drugs that night. When she ran into Chris Cruz, there were some signs that she already knew him. They were both models. They both went often to that nightclub, and both liked drugs. Shortly after daybreak, they left the after-hours club together. They were both arguing, possibly over payment for some drugs that Cruz provided. As they drove home that morning, police believe the argument got more heated. Cruz stopped the car and the disagreement turned violent. In a rage, Cruz grabbed the tire iron from the car. He struck Lynn on the head and face. As she lay near death with a damaged skull, Cruz grabbed his .22 caliber rifle and shot her 3 times in the head. He put the body in the trunk and drove to a deserted parking lot where he dumped the body inside a garbage bin and emptied the 5-gallon container of gasoline that he kept in the trunk. No one saw the fire as it burned for hours shortly after daybreak on July 6, 1991. Then came the scientific 1-2 punch. Evidence A, the DNA profile from the single tooth, which gave the victim her name back. Evidence B, the matching DNA profile from the blood evidence found in Cruz's own car. The defense's main plan was to attack the science. They argued that DNA testing was still a new and unproven tool, but the prosecution showed the careful process, explaining to the jury how the puzzle was solved. It wasn't magic. It was careful, repeatable science. The jury was convinced. Christian Albert Cruz was found guilty of second-degree murder of Mary Lynn Breeden. He was sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of release for 25 years. He became able to apply for parole in 2016 and has asked for it several times. However, the Parole Board of Canada has repeatedly said no to his release. They believe that he is still a risk to the public, so he remains behind bars.